I mentioned earlier in the video when I was promoting this, I think that I'm going to say some things tonight that could absolutely change your lives, or maybe even save you some hardships that you don't have to go through, some heartaches. But not enough people talk about their failures. Not enough people talk about where they go wrong, and not enough people talk about how they recovered. So tonight on Facebook, I want to talk to you live so you get a chance to kind of see who I am, what my personality is. I'm sure you can depict it pretty easily through all of my posts on all social media. Unfortunately, I'm very serious, but I'm serious about success. I'm serious about helping people. I'm serious about putting information out that will teach people, no matter what, as long as you're breathing, you've got a chance. So anyhow, let me get into it. Monday night, I've been working on this project, this software I'm trying to develop that will absolutely dominate social media. I'm infatuated with teaching people how to get maximum exposure for their business. Because I believe the number one reason why people, lose their businesses or don't achieve success in the entrepreneurship world is because they don't have enough exposure. Obscurity kills every business owner. So I'm working on this software. I'm so close to getting it exactly the way I want it. I've been working for hours and hours. I don't allow distractions to distract me. And because I was tired, because I've been working for 16, 17 hours, extremely focused nonstop, I made a mistake. And I deleted a piece of the code that deleted everything. And once it digested inside of me the mistake that I made, I was floored. It took me a little while to really get my mind around what I did. And late at night, I went home. I woke Narissa up because I walked in with a bad attitude because I was fuming. I couldn't even go to bed. I slept on the couch and tossed and turned and said things to myself like, how dumb could you be? You knew better. You shouldn't have done that. And I kind of wallered in self-pity, if you will, for approximately 9 hours. And the reason why, I probably finally fell asleep about 4 or 5 in the morning. I had to put an email out for one of my friends, Ken, at about 8:30, and I made certain that I got that out. And Barbara Corcoran, one of the great women on Shark Tank, said, the biggest difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is this. Successful people take less time feeling sorry for themselves. And although I had to start all over again, and I'm still not real happy about it, I'm still furious that all the mentors, all the people I've employed, all the classes that I've taken because I'm trying to work on this code, I'm trying to develop this software because I believe it will be a game changer. I believe it will be something almost as great as the iPhone. And I know that's ambitious to say, but I'm passionate about every single thing that I work on. And I started thinking about, I wish the people I'd worked with, the people I employed, some of the guys that were giving me guidance, would have told me more of what not to do as to oppose so much of what to do. And I think some of the greatest lessons in life any of us can ever learn is what not to do. One of my favorite all-time quotes comes from Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie says this, as inconsistent as it may seem, you'll learn more about success from the so-called failures than you will from the so-called successes. Because the failures will teach you what not to do. And as I said earlier, I'm far from a failure. I learned from the legend Zig Ziglar that failure is an event. It's not a person. So I made a mistake. I'm still not happy about it, but it takes courage to start over again. It takes courage to rebuild your plan. And whether it's some software that you're trying to code and write, or rather it's a relationship, or rather it's a business, whatever it might be, it takes courage to start over again. And I honestly believe the most powerful difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is unsuccessful people give up when they fail. They take a long time to feel sorry for themselves, to waller in their self-pity. They call it PLOM, poor little old me. And failure is inevitable, especially when you're trying to do great things. But that failure, that mistake I made that I'm still trying to recover from, got me thinking. And I said, I want to start sharing more things with my audience about what not to do. Some mistakes that I've made, and boy have I made a ton of them, but all the mistakes I make going forward are generally original because I learn from my mistakes. I dissect them and I use them as an opportunity to get better. And I hope you will with your mistakes too. But the first mistake I want to share with you tonight is probably the most important one. That's why it's first. And that mistake is this. The most dangerous thing any of us have to deal with in life, bar none, are exceptions. Exceptions get us off track in life. And so if I could give you one piece of advice, the people that are watching this after it was live, or you watching this right now, whatever you do, be careful with exceptions. Because here's what happens. You make an exception once for something that you think is small and petty. And then before you know it, you're making the exception again and again and again. And then behavior that at one point in your life was completely unacceptable becomes to seem normal. So many catastrophes in life can be traced back to people who made exceptions. Whether it was the person who started the bad eating habit, or the person who got out of exercising at the gym, or the person who started drinking, or eventually started using drugs. They made an exception. And the most important thing to ever take away from anything that I say is exceptions will derail you, they'll get you off course, because one of the worst things any of us could ever experience is when we don't even recognize who we've become. We don't recognize the parts of our lives that we've allowed to grow out of control. I read a book that said this. It said, you are the way you are because that's the way you want to be. If you really wanted to be any different, you'd be in the process of changing right now. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that statement. Because so many of us are not the way that we want to be in life, but we're not in the process of making changes. I use the quote all the time. What is the quote? I can edit this when I'm not live. The quote's this. People will cling to an unsatisfactory way of life rather than change in order to get something better for fear of getting something worse. People won't make changes. People get off course, they make exceptions, and before they know it, they look back on a life and they think about what could have been, what should have been. Another quote is this. Regret for the things that we've done can be tempered by time, but regret for the things that we haven't done is inconsolable. We have to get out of our comfort zone. We have to make sure that we're staying on track. We have to keep the right people around us. Let me not spend too much time on exceptions, but boy, are exceptions important. Let me go on to the next fatal mistake that people make. People in life wander around aimlessly. They go to bed at night not knowing if they're winning or if they're losing. They don't know if they're advancing. They don't know if they're getting better every single day. And if you want to do something significant, you must have targets. And 6-month targets, 1-year targets are too far. You need to have daily targets. Something you can aim for and something that you can hit. Because the problem again is that we're wandering generalists. We wander around and we wonder why we don't have fulfillment in life. I honestly believe the only way that we can be fulfilled with our lives are if we're living our purpose. If we're doing something that we enjoy, that we're passionate about, and that we love. How many people get up every single day and dread going to the office, going to their careers, going to their jobs? Now, I dreaded Tuesday morning when I finally got up about 8:30 and convinced myself that today's a new day, and Thomas Edison said failure is a chance to begin again more intelligently. But how many of us don't have that passion, don't have that zeal in our lives because we're not living our purpose? And I honestly believe it can be tracked back to targets. There's an example that Zig Ziglar uses in some of his talks years ago, and you probably can tell I've watched him thousands of times. I think Jonathan De La Garza and I both have. But I love where he talks about this scientist, Henry Fabry, that did an experiment with processionary caterpillars. You might be thinking, what's a processionary caterpillar? Here's what a processionary caterpillar is. A processionary caterpillar is one that just locks step with the caterpillar in front of it and just follows the caterpillar no matter where it goes. further research, I discovered that they actually lay a small strand of, almost like a weave, or they wove something while they're locking step and walking after one another. But this experiment that Henry Fabry did, he put them on the rim of a flower pot. And he put one after another on the rim of this flower pot, and then he gave them a little nudge. And one after another started following each other around and around and around the flower pot. Until eventually, these caterpillars started getting exhausted. But here's what Henry Fabry also did. He put the caterpillars, the processionary caterpillar's favorite food, right in the middle of the flower pot, which just so happened to be pine needles. And so their favorite food was inches away from them, but because they had no aim, they had no targets, these caterpillars confused movement with meaning, and they confused busyness with significance, and eventually they all died of starvation and exhaustion because their food was inches away from their face, and they couldn't even see it because they were locked into a routine in life that they couldn't break. You see, our mind is constantly taking in so much information. There's sensories, and it's called our frontal cortex that takes in this information. And it has to divert the majority of it so that way we can actually function. But when we tell ourselves internally what to look for, what our goals are, what our ambitions are, where we're going in life, then those sensories open up. It's the old expression where you buy a car, and the next thing you know, you see that car everywhere around the road. That car was always there, but you see it now because your sensories are open to seeing it as well. It's almost like an internal eye. So the second mistake is people wander around aimlessly. They don't have goals, they don't have targets, and if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. Lastly, self-talk. Some of us talk to each other, some of us talk to ourselves very negatively. We're always saying hurtful things to ourselves, Some of us say hurtful things to others as well, and we need to get rid of those people. But our self-talk plays a very important role in the types of lives we live. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, when I made this massive mistake on Monday night and even into Tuesday, I was saying some very dumb things to myself that weren't fair. And when I was able to shake off that nonsense of I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't good enough, that I'll never get this solution, I'll never come up with the formula that I need that will dominate where I'm trying to go, eventually I had to tell myself, you know what, that was pretty ambitious of you to try. You know what, it took a lot of determination, it took a lot of focus to stick with this long, and you know what, you're going to get back up, you're going to try again, and you're going to do it more intelligently. And you're going to do it with an opportunity to learn from. So knowing what not to do in life, I honestly believe, is more important than knowing what to do sometimes. Because if people can show us some of the roadblocks in life, some of the pitfalls, that will save us a tremendous amount of time and heartache and shorten our learning curve substantially if we know what to look out for. So let me go back to exceptions. They're the most dangerous thing you will ever deal with in life. You cannot make exceptions. They will derail you and they'll get you off track. Next, you have to have goals. You have to have aim. And it needs to be something daily that you want to achieve. Not something that's so far out of advance that you get distracted and short-term discomfort ends up taking over your long-term happiness. So make sure your goals are short-term. I always say by the yard it's hard, by the inch it's a cinch. I think that was from Les Brown. And lastly, be careful the way you talk to yourself. When those negative thoughts come in your head that you're not good enough, that you're not intelligent enough, that you don't have the right education, that you don't have the right background to do something, you have to delete them. And it's easier said than done. But anything that we focus on grows. Anything that we feed grows. And when we feed those negative thoughts, when we feed those ideas that we're not supposed to do something very significant with our life, that germinates, that grows. And so it's very, very important that no matter what, you change the channel when a picture comes up of a mistake you made in the past, because that will ace your chances at succeeding. Let me close with the quote that I opened up with Andrew Carnegie. And Carnegie talks about, as inconsistent as it may seem, you'll learn more about how to be successful from the failures than you will the so-called successes, because they'll teach you what not to do.
Seek out people that are not living the lives that you want to live. Look at the decisions they're making. Look at the choices they're making. Look at the people they surround themselves with and say, I'm going to do the exact opposite. What was the famous saying with the crash test years ago? I think it was something like, you can learn a lot from a dummy. Look at people that are making some poor decisions and make sure that you learn from their mistakes. Thank you guys so much for watching this live feed. I'm going to do this hopefully a lot more often. I'm going to talk to you about things not to do. So thank you again.